welcome back to episode 18 of the Slap the Ask show. Jimmy and I are absolutely thrilled to welcome the Director of Business Development at the Vemanti Group, Warren Burke. To start off, we'll give an overview of Vemanti, and then we'll dive into Warren's background, experience, and expertise. So, Jimmy, if you want to give a little background on Vemanti and what they're about.
Yeah, of course, Luke. So the Vemanti Group is a holding company that seeks to grow and create value through acquisitions, integration, investment, and development of emerging technology companies. The company teams up with game-changing entrepreneurs to build market-transforming businesses. The company plans and operates its businesses in an integrated ecosystem manner, which they believe distinguishes them from other companies. Vemanti has designed a financial ecosystem that will provide a range of financial services to the banked, underbanked, and unbanked around the world, particularly through the stake in Funded eLoan, a Vietnamese peer-to-peer loan company. USDV, which we're going to be talking about today, will be the glue that holds the system together and allows for mass adoption into the system. This ecosystem will address a growing demand for financial services among underserved individuals and businesses, especially in developing economies like Southeast Asia, with a particular focus in Vietnam. The Vemanti Financial Services Network will provide direct access to digital payments, remittances, lending, and investment to any individual or merchant with a computer, tablet, or smartphone.
So now that we got the synopsis of Vemanti, we'll dive into a little bit about who Warren is, what his background is. And basically, Warren possesses a Bachelor of Science in Computer and Video Games, as well as a Master of Law in International Business from prestigious British universities. After previously working at Stably, a stablecoin development company, as a Director of Business Development, Warren took his skills to Vemanti and has been actively working on the USDV stablecoin project out of Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam. Although currently Warren's in Bali, as you can tell by the volcano in the background.
Anyway.
And also, Warren serves as a venture partner at Pacific Base Capital and was also a former TED Talk speaker. Warren works actively with retail shareholders as the liaison between Vemanti and the shareholders on a weekly basis via Telegram. And Warren has been a key component in developing the SEC-regulated stablecoin at Vemanti and is continuing to change the fintech sector and the future of currency. So with all of that, Warren, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Warren.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So I guess we'll just dive right into the questions here.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, Warren, my first question basically comes down to creating the financial ecosystem. So when you're thinking about creating a financial ecosystem for the unbanked in particular, why is Vietnam and the region of Southeast Asia a whole an attractive region for investment and development?
So to answer that, there's a few answers really. One of them is the rapid growth of adoption of cryptocurrencies throughout Asia. Obviously, people trade, they use them as a store of wealth, as a transfer of value. There's also very large remittance channels between a lot of these. There's a lot of economic migrants that move from the Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam to other countries such as Hong Kong, China, North America, even parts of Europe. So they need a fast, efficient, cheap way of sending money home. I mean, if your monthly income is $500 and you're paying $50 to Western Union to send cash back home, you know, that's a lot of your wealth, essentially. We've designed USDV to be anti-inflationary. So when people hold USDV, spend it, whatever, it actually increases your wealth through different financial instruments. Similar to how we've seen with DeFi yield of staking, but we feel that there's a lot of questions that DeFi doesn't really answer. One of these is security. You know, there's no accountability with these projects. So we, as an SEC regulated company, we feel that we offer a much more trustworthy and compliant solution than a lot of these DeFi platforms, etc. Another reason why that we've chosen to focus on Southeast Asia is we have complementary investments, not just in Vietnam, but also around Southeast Asia. So it's relatively easy for us to scale quite quickly. We also don't have to worry about Forex reserve issues in different countries. Because we've got these investments in the region, you know, we're more than happy to distribute those funds in the region and kind of distribute the USD back in from our own reserve, if you will.
Yeah, it seems like Vemanti is like or not Vemanti, but Vietnam is a prime area to be developing these stable coins, which can help the unbanked, gain finances and be able to start the companies they want to start. So just kind of going off of that, like you obviously had many options after working at Stably. You have a long history in the fintech sector. Why did you join the Vemanti team when you could have basically worked at like any other fintech company? And kind of going off that, like how did you meet Tan? How did that all go? That process?
So actually, it was Corey Huang, the CEO of Stably. He was obviously impressed with my work, and he introduced me to Tan. Tan had a very strong vision of the ecosystem, and a lot of our beliefs really co-align. I was saying this isn't just a money grab. Obviously, there's monetization, but we're not just focused on profits only. We want to give something back. So Tan was really aligned with the social impact. Vemanti also had complementary investments with finance partners in several key regions. So everything just kind of fell into place rather easily. I was working on my own PSP in about 2019, pre-COVID, called Spend, and that didn't really take off that well. I was literally a one-man team going out there and trying to do my own thing. Tan heard a lot of the things I was trying to achieve with Spend, working with WeChat and Alipay, because I had those connections when I used to live in China, trying to get an authorized kind of PSP license for those. So Tan knew a lot of the landscape already. He was very familiar with living in a different country, people moving away on Tan's cashback. He was really interested in DeFi at the time. So creating an anti-inflationary stablecoin, we really kind of coincided. Tan's bounce ideas off as well. He doesn't kind of BS. If he doesn't know something, he'll just say, "What's that?" He'll probe. He'll ask more questions. And if he does understand something, he will fight. To kind of let you know, like, "Oh, I don't think this is a good idea," and he'll justify it in a very solid way. He's very easy to talk to. So it was just a good working relationship for me, to be honest. He's also mentoring me quite well, kind of training me to kind of take on more responsibility with Vemanti. But so far, we work as a great team. It's very important in a co-working relationship to just speak without a filter. And with Tan, I know no matter what I say, it won't offend it or he won't get defensive or anything. So it was just a good working relationship. They had complementary investments. They also had the right connections for us to deploy and scale quite quickly. Because the key with these solutions, especially in fintech, is once you start to make money and gain users, several banks will just throw money at something and just kind of take over, the market share. We've said since day one, we don't intend to compete. We want to complement. So we want to work with a lot of these banking partners, these MasterCard, work with several banks in Vietnam, like pvcom Bank and state banks in different other key regions. So for us, it just kind of makes a lot of sense, and everything seems to go easy without fault. So it's been a great working relationship, to be honest.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so Warren, in our current financial system, there's clearly a lot of inefficiency and exclusion. I know in the United States, if you want to get a bank account, you basically have to have a social security card number as well as an ID. So there's clearly barriers of entry. Blockchain maximalists, they advocate that a financial system built on blockchain rails would actually allow for a lot more people to be included into the financial system. Obviously, in developing nations, maybe they not have access to traditional forms of ID and things like that, and may have no means of getting a bank account. So in your opinion, what is it about the blockchain that allows for this immense financial inclusion?
So there's a few things that really attracted me to blockchain tech a couple of years ago. One of them is trustless transactions. I don't need to know who the other person is for me to send them, either an NFT or I need to send them a store of value. Another thing that I really think that blockchain is the internet 2.0. It's essentially, the next level of internet. Right now, our internet is governed by different legislators, corporations, conglomerates. It's not really a tool of people anymore. If you look at things like the Tor network, it's essentially, a governed, even though it is supposed to be anonymous internet, the dark web, some people might call it, it's still governed, it's still trackable. Not to say that that's a good thing. It's just that the Internet 2.0, we kind of need these trustless transactions to spur innovation. It's very difficult to work within regulation, as we've seen with USDV. It's still possible. It's still extremely difficult. Another reason why I think blockchain is essentially, the next level of transactions is the security of it. There's something called finality. So a transaction cannot be returned. If I'm a merchant and I'm using a payment network, I'm very subjected to chargebacks, which leads to a merchant being scammed or people doing trades of value. Someone can essentially just say, this wasn't me, file a chargeback with the bank. The merchant loses out in the end. So for us, when we're working with a global economy, it's not a domestic economy anymore. The world is so much smaller than it was 50 years ago when these systems were kind of invented and put in place. Look at Western Union right now. They have cash offices around the world and they have agents through agency banking and things, but the fees are just ridiculously high. And a lot of these legacy financial rails that we're building fintech on now, these have been around since 70 years. And it's very difficult for us to convince these banks that this is the future. So one of the things that I'm really excited about in retail adoption, mainstream adoption of blockchain tech, is that fintech is going to be able to produce financial tools for 2021. We're still using these legacy things, as I said, from like 1970 and things. It's just not feasible. One of the things that's really exciting about blockchain is the immediate transfer of value as well. So if I go into Macy's and I buy a sweater, that money could essentially go directly to the producer in Bangladesh. If I'm in New York Times Square and I'm buying jewelry from Tiffany's, I can send that directly to the jewelry designers in India or to China or wherever. So it makes the global economy that much smaller. And when we're dealing with 2021, we need to be thinking about 2030. Technology moves so fast, so much faster than what we've previously seen before. Blockchain is the next evolution of internet.
Right. And it's funny because me and Luke, we were just on vacation actually in Charleston. I remember talking to one of our friends, we were talking about like systems like banking and insurance, things like that. There are these huge industries that are basically just acting as middlemen, right? Like what do they actually do?
Yeah.
And it seems like blockchain will allow for those industries to kind of, that waste, if you want to call it, to not really exist and allow for even more efficiency to be, experienced in the system. So I find it so cool.
But it's not just about the transactions. It's about the financial instruments. So if I want to take a loan out, I need to have some form of collateral. I need to go through and show X amount of paperwork and income and go through all these heavy steps. And when you're dealing with something like a pandemic, when there's hundreds of thousands of people that don't even have a bank account struggling, how do these kind of people improve cash flow? So it is possible with these trustless transactions on blockchain for an individual to, approach, a community and essentially take funding out through different varied assets. For example, if people in the UK want to get a mortgage, even though they're paying $2,000 a month in rent, they can't get a mortgage for $500 a month because the bank says, well, you need to prove that you can pay this $500 back. It's crazy. But if someone, say, for example, has a bit of land or they have some jewelry or something, they can, tokenize it, go on the blockchain and say, hey, I have, an acre that my grandfather left me something, I want to buy a house or build a house or something. They can use an asset such as, 1 or 2 Bitcoin to take a loan out and use that as collateral. There's multiple ways. Even if there's an old system called Hawala, which is, I believe it's a Muslim money transfer network. Individual agents basically take the money and they pass it along, through a chain of 12 or 14, and they pass it in various places around the world. There's various different savings in this Islam community where an individual, say for example, there's 10 families each year, these 10 families will put $10,000 in and each family takes a turn taking it out. That heavily relies on trust. You need to know that these people are going to be paying every year, every month. But with blockchain, we can autonomize a lot of these transactions, so we don't need to know the individual. The smart contracts basically execute everything.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
It's so I think
back to like a system of bartering, right? Like the economy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Going away, which is kind of cool. Back to nativism almost.
Right. Yeah. So it's like clear the advantages that you have for like the underbanked and like Vietnam and whatnot. But like, how will people in like the developed world, like in the U.S. and like tax-savvy like tech savvy users benefit from like using USD or USDV as compared to like USDT or USDC? Like, what are the advantages of using, you know, the Vemanti stablecoin as opposed to the other ones?
Yeah. So one of the big ones is we're over collateralized. USDC and USDT, I think their cash reserves are less than 3%. USDC are also approaching a banking charter, but what they don't realize is that actually restricts them. It doesn't protect them long term. You know, when the compliance team come down on them and say, okay, you're a US bank now, you have to reclaim all of your USD C essentially all around the world, bring it back. Anyone outside the US cannot use USDC. So USDV being situated offshore with onshore US trust partners, we can actually access both markets. So we've really planned a very solid structure that no matter what happens with regulation, we will be safe. We can still continue. The people at USDC, you know, at Circle, they don't realize how restrictive a US banking charter actually is. Me personally, I think they just rushed into it. They panicked. They just thought, we've got to get a bank charter. They didn't actually think about, oh, well, what happens in 2-3 years when I'm not allowed to operate a fractional reserve, you know, monetary system? What happens when I can't have a stable coin that's backed by a bunch of property in Hong Kong or whatever? So that to me is the biggest. You know, we're very trustworthy, we're very open, very transparent. We're over collateralized. For every $1, there's normally like another 1 or 2. Always backed. At minimum, it's backed 1-to-1. Whenever someone wants to redeem, they can always redeem 1-to-1. That's very important for us. At the best times, we'll be over collateralized by $2, average 1.8. So for every 1 USDV in existence, we'll have 1.8 dollars in the reserves, split between the offshore and onshore. Another reason is that we're building the financial ecosystem around the USDV so we can have much more control and accountability. USDC just kind of throws, you know, these tokens at a lot of these exchanges to promote them. Ourselves, we've been told extreme listing fees, and you know, we have to have crazy liquidity requirements to list on these exchanges. To us, we're not about that. We have solid payment systems. We're actually working with one of the top 20 blockchain protocols now to launch, essentially, I'm trying to think of the way to phrase it without giving it away. It's essentially a PSP in partnership with pvcom Bank in Vietnam that is very replicable across different regions in Southeast Asia. And this will allow 2 million transactions of various amounts between the US and Vietnam, or Vietnam and the US, for a couple of dollars, essentially. There will be service fees on top of that, but that price of settlement is extremely attractive today. So not $2 million, 2 million transactions of various amounts. One transaction could be $10, could be $10,000, could be $50,000. But 2 million transactions for a few dollars is very competitive. And we're actually speaking to payment rails such as Visa and MasterCard and you know, Union Pay to see if they want to adopt this. They're very excited. It's very interesting to them. The reason being, they don't need a chain of people managing the transactions between different countries. So we use USDV as the rails, and then we cash out in the domestic currency on the other side. So we don't annoy any domestic regulators. We don't annoy onshore regulators with the US. We just use USDV as simply a tool. But we can only do that when we have full control and full accountability. If something goes wrong, we can monitor the network, we can interject, we can get involved. If there is a scam involved, we can track it on our end with affiliate tracking in the smart contract. So we've thought of several different methods of how USDV could be used. If someone wants to stake with our native platform, what they'll essentially be able to do is earn a very reliable, decent interest. This isn't crazy air-backed pyramid, you know, altcoin kind of APY that you see on a lot of these DeFi yield farming networks. It's actually tied to capital markets. So we deploy these to different entities that Vemanti has a stake in. They loan that to retail or SMEs. We take the interest, we take a little bit off the top to monetize and pay for the system, and then we distribute that back to the USDV users. But again, we can only do that if we're in control. So accountability for us is a big thing. Not to mention that we're not only 100% backed, but 180% backed. You know, compared to 2.9% of USDT or USDC, the banking charter problems of USDC, we see those two as our main competitors right now. There are multiple other stable coins, But we can see Pax G actually burned, I think it was a seven or eight figure amount of their gold-backed stablecoin. So regulation is definitely coming in, and we're sitting in a very good position to be onshore and offshore. So if USDC get claimed back and they want to focus on the US, that's fine. We can, they can have the US market. USDV will always find a place in the US, and we can just simply focus on offshore. If the regulators give, some other kind of crazy regulation, we have workarounds with that. We've consulted multiple legal councils, different teams. We've spoken to, obviously Franklin Knoll is an advisor on USDV. And, the guy's been studying the history of money since it was seashells. So he's got a very good idea of what's going to come in the future. So we have a very solid team at USDV. And I'm honestly not really concerned with regulation or anything coming forward. But the main reason for USDV adoption is trust. People don't have to worry that there's going to be any rug pulls or any issues. If there's a USDV working with a project, it's relatively safe. Our due diligence is so rigorous with a lot of these partners that we've actually rejected dozens of people that want to adopt USDV just because they don't meet a certain regulation requirement, or there was a couple of red flags of the partnership. Maybe it wasn't really the right targeting or something. So we're very selective with who we work with. So trust and anti-inflationary will probably be the two biggest reasons to adopt USDV.
Okay, cool. That's awesome to hear. And I find it funny how you talk about how USDC and Circle, they're now like searching for a banking charter. I feel like when it comes to fintech companies, most of them try to just move fast, get market share, and worry about the rules later, right? And I think we're kind of seeing the downsides of that right now with Coinbase, where Coinbase is trying to launch this lending product through USDC, where they promise around 4% returns for the users who opt into the product. But now the SEC is basically threatening to sue Coinbase if they do in fact launch the product. Being that Vemanti is SEC regulated and they're very, very conscientious of regulation coming. Do you see the yield generation aspect behind USDV being under threat at all by the SEC or other regulators, or no?
No, not at all. So one of the reasons being that it's actually from a reliable source. It's from a capital market. Coinbase are very vague about where it comes from, because in my opinion, I think it might just be a little bit of a profit share. I think that, it's just a bit of a Ponzi, like they're just funding to get people to attract, to bring USDC into Coinbase and stake it. That gives Coinbase the right to kind of deploy their capital. Maybe they need liquidity. Maybe they want to kind of push some order book liquidity up a bit. But for USDV, it comes from a very reliable regulated source, which is, SME loan lending. Another reason being that our USDV or our business model has basically already been approved by the SEC in the Form 10. So they've just been like, is everything one-to-one backed? Is every question, that they've asked, have a kind of satisfactory answer? And they've just said, okay, just be a reminder that everything you do is, at your own risk, which is as best the SEC can say is, good job, thumbs up. So we're not really concerned with USDV in terms of our yield generation. We've consulted multiple legal counsels. We've also working with various distribution partners to make sure that it's not just readily available, but the onus on distribution is from the third party. So we won't actually be distributing the yield ourselves. It will just be through distribution partners.
Right. So when it comes to distribution partners, are you talking about companies like Compound and Aave, like those types of distribution partners?
Yeah, like staking partners, people that want to go and obtain. Maybe there's like a different partner in Vietnam, for example, that can do the distribution of USDV. So it won't necessarily be in our own staking platform that they receive the rewards. It might be something like MetaMask, something that's not related to us. So with the Celsius concept, we essentially send the rewards to Celsius, and then Celsius would distribute to the users on our behalf. So they actually subsidize the USDV in their reserve. So if you look at things like USDC, USDT on Celsius, I think it's 4.4 recently, 4.4% APY. we could actually subsidize that with an extra 10. So why would someone stake USDT for 4 when they can stake USDV for 14? We're SEC regulated, everything's 1.8 backed. Like it just doesn't make sense to use other stable coins, right?
Right.
100%.
So Warren, just kind of pivoting off that, like right now, there's a lot of issues with the gas fees being so high within the Ethereum network.
Yep.
Like Solana has gained so much ground due to its low gas fees. With like USDV's primary use case being payments and remittances, as well as being in like a ERC20 token, how will USDV users be protected from paying such high gas fees within the ecosystem when it seems like that's an issue that all these other people are dealing with right now?
Yeah. So the ERC20 was basically just an industry standard so we can access different infrastructure. For the Fireblocks adoption, it was much easier for us to mint in ERC20, deposit that in Fireblocks, because Fireblocks is one big internal ledger. So it's kind of like an in-house email system, right, in a corporation. You don't really send them outside. It doesn't really go through the internet. It goes through an intranet. So as long as another user is using a Fireblocks, they can receive it, little to no fee. We also intend for the high TPS networks that we work with. I mean, 2 million different transactions for a few dollars is not the same as an Ethereum network, Right. It's not the same as one transaction for $400 or something crazy. I do anticipate that when Ethereum kind of adopts these new hard forks and these new updates, it is going to be much easier, but we don't intend to rely on ERC20 for payments. That's literally just to mint for the infrastructure purposes, get it into Fireblocks, etc. Work with the different trust partners very easily. But for the payment side of USDV, we actually reissue on different networks. So we won't be using ERC20 for payments.
Okay. Gotcha. I know you mentioned earlier one of your answers about the pvcom bank partnership, but just want to say congratulations on landing that partnership.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I'm curious to know, like, how do you see the relationship benefiting pvcom bank, and how's it going to benefit Vemanti? Like, what's the actual scope of what's going to happen between those two companies?
So the pvcom bank relationship is kind of obtained by TAN. We offer pvcom bank new users. They're going to be getting much more cost-effective fintech solutions, not just in kind of foreign distribution remittance, but payments on the ground as well. We also intend to produce a similar kind of credit line card. So when people go with pvcom bank and stake USDV, they actually obtain a credit line at the same time. So this is going to be very handy for a lot of people in the region. Very low cost, low interest. We issue that through pvcom bank. So pvcom bank gets more users. We get compliance in the domestic region that any pvcom bank is working in with.
That sounds great. I'm assuming, those types of relationships are probably going to expand as the financial ecosystem expands.
Of course, yeah. I mean, we're looking at Indonesia right now for a banking partner. We have plans to expand into Thailand and Cambodia relatively quickly. So for us, the pvcom bank relationship is fantastic. I mean, I think we might be one of the first kind of blockchain companies to actually work with a bank in such a close relationship. I mean, you've heard of like Ripple announcing like a Visa partnership, but nothing ever came of it, right? We've got pvcom bank hitting us up every 1 or 2 days, like, hey, what about this flow? Can we do something like this? So they're very eager for us to get started, which is phenomenal. Like if someone told me that we'd be working with banks in blockchain by 2021, I would have told you crazy. Maybe 2030 or something, just the way it was a few years ago. But now we've got banks coming to us saying, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? What can we do with your tech stack? Like what can we do with your trust partners, etc. So it's a really exciting time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and kind of going back to regulation, like with the Fed in the US, like I know Gary Gensler recently said that like it's time to regulate the cryptocurrency markets. And Jerome Powell said that like we need to start regulating these stable coins. Explain like how is Vemanti like complying with this changing regulatory landscape in the US markets? Like I know your SEC reporting and everything. Like, are you worried about any of these regulations that could be coming from the federal level, or how are you guys kind of anticipating that?
So we are anticipating it, but we're not anticipating it in like we're taking a gamble, right? It's more of a case of if they do X, we do Z, right? If we've got plans B, C, D, E, F, like we've got so many backups just in case. I mean, one of the reasons we set up the SPV was to essentially manage a lot of the transactions without being a distributor, right? And that's why we work with trust partners in the US. So we're not distributing any kind of asset. So we have no matter what regulation comes in, it would be several years before they even looked at something like USDV because it's such a unique infrastructure. I mean, and even things like this pvcom bank relationship just adds more protection. You know, we have an offshore administrator of the stablecoin. We have an offshore SPV that manages a lot of the transactions and authorizes them. So Vemanti is in a very safe place as a private stablecoin, the same way like private credit card companies, private banks, you know, private wealth managers, the same way a lot of these operate. You know, we're just slap bang right in the middle where we're just regulated enough to do what we do, but not too regulated that we can't do, you know, a lot of other things.
Yeah.
So the more banking partners that we bring on, which is highly likely, we're going to be in a fantastic position to work with these, you know, in a basically hand-holding process. So in Vietnam, pvcom Bank protects us, and then in the US, we have trust partners that we work with that protects us there. So compliance is very important to us, but it's definitely been the most difficult, but I wouldn't say it's the biggest threat.
Right. Gotcha. So I guess my understanding is the US trust partners Prime Trust and the offshore is First Digital.
Correct.
Can you just like reiterate again, what's the point of having a US trust and then an offshore trust? Why have the separation between the two? I know you already said before, but love to hear it again.
So Prime Trust actually have a good tech stack that allows us to accept ACH and wire transfers in the US. They also have the correct licenses that we can operate under. So we don't have to be regulated ourselves to obtain those licenses. We work with Prime Trust to authorize those transactions. So we actually follow their KYC, their AML frameworks, a lot of their kind of regulatory frameworks as well. We work with them. So anything onshore, we work with Prime Trust. The reason for First Digital Trust is essentially minting the offshore. We can mint offshore, but not in the US. And then we can distribute the USD-backed stablecoin within the US through Prime Trust. Say, for example, the US turns around and says, okay, no more US stablecoins. We need everything to be, you know, CBDC, government owned, et cetera, et cetera. We just simply say, okay, Prime Trust, thank you very much. We can't accept you anymore. And then we probably set up our own pvcom bank anchor in the US or something, you know what I mean? So when we mint offshore, we're not subject to US regulations, but then we need to be able to transact with the US citizens. So with that, we use Prime Trust. So it's a fractional, how do I say? It's like a fractional reserve banking, but without the banking charter, without actually being fractional, you know? So this allows us to have a reserve in the US and also in Hong Kong. So this gives us two different regions where we're essentially double collateralized.
Okay, cool. Just another quick question I had. So I know before in previous calls you talked about creating a basket of fiat currencies and launching other types of stable coins. Would this involve other trust partners getting involved? Say there was a GBP stablecoin that Vemanti want to launch. Does that mean you have to get a trust partner in the UK, or could it all be within Prime Trust or First Digital, things like that?
Yeah. So Prime Trust actually accepts 150 plus different currencies. So there's no reason why we couldn't look at something like that with Prime Trust. I mean, a lot of the tech stack that we use is owned by Prime Trust. Our own tech stack is more focused on the payments and remittance side outside the US. So Prime Trust just kind of allowed us to deploy much faster, but the offshore rails will be our own. So when we want to do something like a fiat basket, there's a high chance it won't go through Prime Trust at all. The FCA in the UK are kind of in a gray space right now with crypto, so we're not really too sure about that, for example. The euro is highly, is very, very, how do I phrase it? The EU is very happy to look at blockchain CBDCs. Several other countries. I mean, El Salvador is buying Bitcoin. I mean, the guys basically just turned El Salvador into one big OTC desk, right? They have to buy it from one agent, and that company is owned by the president. So it's not as attractive as people are saying that El Salvador just uses Bitcoin. So if we want to do a different fiat basket, we will most likely look for a regulated partner in that country, but we wouldn't necessarily have to be a trust company. Vietnam, for example, is very slow in their financial laws. So we have to work with someone like pvcom Bank, right? So that's essentially one option of having like the next one could be like a VND stablecoin. And then we'll be looking at somewhere like Indonesia, which just recently announced new laws in 2 days on Monday that come into effect, which basically allows remittance to forced to use rupiah or UN, which is interesting. So there's something that we can look at there if we look at Indonesia next, because that's also a very big remittance market. So as we kind of scale out, it's more about working with regulated entities, not just trust partners. But yeah, one of the keys is working with these regulated fintech partners.
Gotcha.
Warren, do you see CBDCs as a threat to USDV, or
no?
How do you look at them?
No. I mean, it's the same way as saying a credit card's a threat to debit cards. You know, CBDCs have a place, they have a use. You know, there's a reason why people use cash, right? When I was in China, I went about 7 or 8 months without using cash. Everything was paid for by the phone, and it was a pretty crazy time. Even paying for anything was done by your phone. I only received cash because my landlord gave me my deposit back in cash. And I was asking him, can you just send it me on WeChat? And he's like, no, I can't cash. And that's probably because he doesn't declare a rental property, right? So there's always reasons for people to use a government-owned stablecoin. And then there's always reasons for people to use a privatized stablecoin. You know, not saying that people would do nefarious activities with USDC. It's just that we're going to be focused more on offshore transactions. So for that, you know, it's going to be people don't want the red tape when they're working with USD. If I send $10,000 US dollars from Hong Kong to Cambodia, that transaction has to go through the Federal Reserve in the US and then back to Cambodia. It's 2021. Why are we still using this old system? There's more scams and kind of nefarious activity using USD around the world than there is with any other. So again, there's always a place for privatized stablecoins. Now, nefarious activities won't be applicable to USDD because we have a very strong KYC and AML policy. But that's just one use case really of people not liking the government kind of pushing into their space.
Right.
So there's always going to be a reason for privatized stablecoins. Walmart's probably going to release a wall dollar. Amazon's going to release a stable coin. Like there's so much use case for them. The CBDC is, you can't just have one stable coin. Everything's kind of, people like their own tastes, right? But it's not a threat to privatized stable coins, not just USDV. Even if the US forces people to use the CBDC, people are just going to look elsewhere. And at USDV, if we're focused on offshore transactions, that just leaves us in a better place.
Right, gotcha. And it's funny that you bring up like people be concerned about potential nefarious activities. I know critics of cryptocurrency, they always say like, oh, Bitcoin or Ethereum that's just used to do like illegal trades. It's like USD's been the medium of exchange for all these illegal trades to begin with for decades. So it's not really, it's like fake news. It's not really a big deal. All right. So like, I guess one final question Luke and I had is just, we're curious to know if you can give us an outline of the product roadmap, the rollout of USDV through the end of the year, and maybe through the first half of 2022. What do you see the rollout being like?
So the next step for us is essentially building out this Vietnamese kind of deployment settlement solution with pvcom Bank. Then we copy and paste that and we deploy to most likely Indonesia, then deploy it to other places around Southeast Asia. So depending how fast we can get this settlement solution deployed is when we'll be looking at the second region that we'll be deploying to. After that, we want to increase the distribution partners. We've been speaking to a couple of providers we want to acquire a DEX. It's like a multi-DEX, so it's like, how do I phrase it? It's like a cross between a decentralized exchange, a centralized exchange with tokenized stocks, ETFs, et cetera, combining stocks and cryptocurrencies. So we've been looking at acquiring one of those in the next few months and then deploying that early next year, just to kind of give good use case for USDV, but also, you know, monetize a separate product as well. And besides that, it's literally just building out the banking partners in key regions and then deploying a kind of copy and pasted version of the settlement solution that allows us to scale quite fast off of these different networks. We can also work with, I think there's 3 entities in the Philippines and 1 in Brazil that we're speaking to about kind of combining the network to give more access to different key regions. Vietnam is a very interesting space for a lot of people. They just don't have the relationships like we do to do something in Vietnam. So that's another reason why the pvcom Bank relationship is very exciting, you know. So we are going to be one of the first to offer this kind of solution in Vietnam, definitely in Indonesia and places. I think Thailand's just launched a crypto PSP gateway, which is fantastic because it paves the way for other innovations to come into the region. So yeah, the next step is the Vietnamese solution, then the building out the banking partners in Indonesia, then I'm looking at the multi-dex for next year, and then essentially copy and pasting this to scale up.
Right. And then just one more thing I wanted to mention. I saw you guys just recently hired a new chief financial officer, Steve Jones.
Yeah.
And he's going to be actually based out of Ho Chi Minh. So you're going to be working pretty closely with him, I assume. What do you see his role being? Is it raising capital to move forward in the project, or, you know, how are you going to be working?
Most of what he's doing now is a lot of the due diligence on a lot of the acquiring solutions, not just for USDV, but for Vemanti. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he's looking at, he's going through a lot of the DD, he's reading a lot of the finance books, basically ensuring that the interesting acquisition is definitely interesting. You know, there's nothing inflated. As horrible as it sounds, you know, there's no better time to start looking at distressed assets. So we're hoping to kind of push the adoption of multiple other Vemanti projects, not just USDV, but with a lot of distressed asset acquisitions. A lot of these businesses are very profitable. They have very good market share. They've just become very difficult to run because, you know, for 2.5 years or whatever, it's essentially been, you know, quite a difficult, slippery slope. And it sucks. It really does, you know. But at the same time, we think it's a good way to honor a lot of these entrepreneurs and businessmen by acquiring their business and giving it new life. You know, we're not just looking at swooping in, paying it a super low dollar and kind of taking over it. We're looking to kind of pay homage to a lot of entrepreneurs by keeping their business, you know, alive. So now is a good time to get a lot of these distressed assets. So Steve is actually fantastic, pretty funny guy. He's had a very good career over the past like 10 years. Yeah. So his role is going to be quite key, to be honest, in as Vemanti scales out.
Yeah,
it's awesome. Yeah, I guess like closing remarks. So just one thing for me, you know, obviously I love the Vemanti stock. I'm a huge shareholder. I think one thing I find so interesting about the USDV project itself is we have regions in Southeast Asia like Vietnam and other countries where there's a capital constraint, right? And then we have the US where it's too easy to get capital. I can get a loan for a house for probably like 3% interest, no problem. And just taking that capital, using USDV to deploy it in an actually growing region like Southeast Asia and earning interest, like you said, something around 10%, where that's not going to happen in the US. I find it so attractive. And I think that future investors and future stakers of USDV will find it as well. And it's just like a win-win for everybody. Like you said, these entrepreneurs paying homage to them and things like that, by giving them additional capital, allowing the businesses to thrive, whereas people in the West who have the capital can earn a very nice yield on their money. So I feel like it's just a nice win-win. We're not earning, as you said in previous calls, shit coins that are just backed by air. It's actual USD or that is.
It's crazy, man. I don't understand how, I just don't understand how a lot of these people see the value. For me, blockchain tech always needs a use case, right? But when you've got projects that literally earn money from, I don't even know how they earn these crazy APYs and stuff, but they pay you in a token that's got no real value besides being sold. So who wants to buy the token whose only purpose is to be sold? It doesn't make sense. So why not have a stablecoin solution that benefits, an ecosystem, an economy, and the individuals that all operate within it. To us, it's just the next step. We think CBD, I mean, if we can make a stable coin that's anti-inflationary, why doesn't the US make a CBDC that's anti-inflationary?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems pretty common sense at this point. I feel like it's just like, it's the next financial technology revolution. I mean, you've seen cryptocurrency, you've seen NFTs, now stable coins are gaining traction. And it was funny, Jimmy and I were talking about the Kevin O'Leary interview when he was talking about his WonderFi. And he was like, what's the biggest threat? He said regulation. And I feel like Vemanti is the first company they're in there, they're regulated, they're publicly traded. And I feel like you guys just have such a big step ahead, and I'm excited to see what you guys do. So
yeah, someone posted it in the Telegram group. They actually phrased it right. They said, how we've done all these crazy, amazing things that no one's done before. Why is no one picking it up? So one of the questions that I have for a lot of journalists is like, how do we make our story exciting besides being the first in a regulated space to have a banking relationship in Vietnam, to have different PSP rails that we've developed, to have a fractional reserve system that's over collateralized stablecoin when all the others are less than 3%. Like, what do we have to do to get, eyes and to get people talking about it? It's honestly, it's pretty frustrating at times, but we've just got to kind of crack on with the job and, get it done. And we've got a lot of faith in the project that people will look at it eventually and see these exciting things. But with the regulators, we haven't been hiding anything like a lot of these other companies. We don't have an SPV offshore to hide anything. We're literally going to the SEC. We're going to these regulators and these banks and saying, look at us. This is what we're doing. What do you think? If we're doing something bad, now's the time to tell us. When we can always do an alternative if something's not right, but we're not hiding anything. We've laid everything on the table and saying, this is what we're doing. What do you think? And a lot of these others like USDC, Circle, and USDT, everything's on the back burner. No one's saying anything. They're willing to settle fines and things. So transparency is number one for us. We've got nothing to hide whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. And I just feel like with blockchain, with USDV and this like advent of the fintech based on the blockchain, it's just really returning power to the people. And it's this establishment mindset that we're all realizing like, all right, like it's all kind of unnecessary to have all these big institutions where we can actually just transact ourselves. And that's what I love about it. That's why I'm so into this project. And I think it's going to be great for especially the people in the developing world that don't really have a chance right now. This is going to be huge. And I just love it. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and tell us about what's going on.
Thank you very much, guys. No worries. I really enjoyed it. We can always do another one in a couple of months if you want. And we can give you an update of what's, look back at now and then see what the difference is.
Yeah. Thanks so much for coming on, Warren. Jimmy and I are investors, not traders. So we look forward to the project and where you guys are taking it. And, it's going to be fun. So I look forward to it.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Warren. Take care.
Take care.
Adios.
Adios.